Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, we talk about the four different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always interviewing entrepreneurs, influencers, creators on the cutting edge, shaping the world. So today we have Susan Gold, and she's an author. She's a transformer and she's a consultant. She's got a really interesting background from New York City to LA. And today's going to be talking all about female entrepreneurship, thought leadership, and starting your own business. So, Susan, welcome.
Dr. Liu, thank you. I'm excited to be here and super excited to be in front of your audience.
Yeah, I know. And I'm really excited to get to talk to you because, a lot of the audience, they're female executives and they're very, heart-centered. They want to do something more. The 9 to 5 isn't really doing it. So tell us more about your background and how you got started.
Well, I grew up in a really chaotic home in the center of Pennsylvania with two brilliant individuals at the helm, but they were riddled with addiction and mental illness. So it was a really interesting trajectory, and I was excited to get out of that home setting, and I did. The morning after I graduated from high school, I essentially left and pretty much didn't go back. But I have great respect for my family, and I don't feel it was a mistake. I ended up in that family. I got great tools as a result. I just needed to do a little cleaning up in my adulthood. So college, I just wanted to skip. I wanted to go right to New York City. I negotiated my way out my junior year for a term as an intern in New York. And I worked for an arts management firm. And that really gave me a taste of the city. I was living in New York at 19, exploring all the city had to offer. And went back as soon as I graduated from college. I wanted to work not in arts management, but in something a little more glitzy. So I went mainstream entertainment and worked uptown in one of those big high rises for International Creative Management, which was a large global talent agency that's still around today. And I ultimately went to work for an agent who matched celebrities with brands. And I ended up following him. He left the agency to form his own company. And that's really where I learned how to negotiate celebrity talent deals. I wouldn't have had that opportunity at the desk. And then he had a little addiction himself. He used to invite young actresses in the afternoon, and I would have to disappear, and it was getting quite awkward. And then he tried to the same thing with me, and that didn't work. I grabbed my purse and ran out of there. And oddly, I was training Barbara Walters, the television host and newscaster at the time, on the side to make a little money. And she took one look at me at 7 a.m. the next morning and said, "What's wrong?" And I was super tight-lipped, but she was a great interviewer, and she got it out of me. And she said, "I'm coming to your office with you this morning, and we're going to confront this man." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'll be okay." I ended up leaving that day, and I decided to open my own talent brokerage firm because I couldn't consider going to work as an assistant for someone else. After that experience, it just felt, even though I only had about 2.5 months of savings in the bank, and I was, in my early 20s living in New York City on my own, I decided I'd give it a shot. So I did a lot of cold calling, and Donnie Deutsch, he's a well-known entrepreneur and television host now, but at the time he was running his dad's ad agency on Madison Avenue, and I somehow connected, and he said, "I really want Andy Warhol to endorse one of my clients, Pontiac." And he goes, "Do you think you could get him?" And I'm like, "I'll give it a try." So I called the factory and nobody would pick up. So I took the train down there, knocked on the door, and Fred, Andy's manager, answered the door. And I explained why I was there. And he said, "Come back tomorrow at the same time and I'll let you talk to Andy." So I did. I was really scared. I didn't know what I was going to say. And I was ushered into Andy's studio, and there he was, like penciling away with a pin spotlight on his hair going every direction. And there were 3 pugs, little dogs, running around the studio, and occasionally they'd jump up in his arms. And he didn't really want anything to do with me, but he he was paying a lot of attention to those dogs. And then finally he looked up, he stopped, he looked me in the eye for the first time. And he said, now really, why would I want to do this? And I just took a breath and the words just came right out of me, because you can have the pugs in the shop with you. Mm-hmm. And he paused and he looked at his dogs and he looked at me and he goes, okay, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And that really was the start of me becoming known to attach celebrities to brands. And I've had an affinity for it. And it led me into producing. And then it led me full scale back to my own company as a consultant, more from the PR and biz dev perspective, because that's what really fit better. But I had an amazing run and just convinced all kinds of people to do things that I never thought they would do, including Taylor Swift and Jack Black and David Beckham, to be interviewed by television cartoon characters, Phineas and Ferb for Disney. But really, the tenacity of my upbringing and my ability to overcome difficult obstacles has really served me. And also not being afraid to reinvent myself, and also to really go back my past history and really take a deep dive, because I found early on in adulthood some things weren't working. Mm-hmm. And I was brave enough to admit it. And the first thing that had to go was drinking. I got clean and noticed that I had addiction, not just with drinking, but with multiple layers. I just have that type of personality. And that was really essential. And then I also had to take a look at clinical depression and learn what that was about and how that affected me. And I did all types of talk therapy. And I think it was really helpful for me to create that kind of storyline through the talking, but ultimately it was more somatic work that helped me really come to understand who I was. And ultimately, I moved to Los Angeles and met my greatest guru, who was my ex-husband. I had to wake up to the fact that I was living in a narcissistic relationship. I was living with a narcissist and I was being drained. I was being flattened, and I had tried everything I could to keep that marriage together. But I finally had to surrender and leave that dynamic. So I feel like that was the precipice. All sorts of experience in my life came together to help me through that experience. And that's really when the self-love started coming through, and I started reevaluating again deeply. And I was sort of called to write a book. I never thought I would. I thought, a book's just a PR tool. Do I really have to go through? But I kept continually being encouraged that I had a unique story. I had a lot to share. So I put it all down on paper. And I have to say the experience was really incredible. Just the amount of self-respect I've garnered and the amount of self-love. And then now I'm getting close to it being published and leaking it out by drips and drops. And I'm finding people really responding to my experiences and echoing similarities. So yeah, that's where I hope to go to help other people just through my own experience.
Yeah, very fascinating story. A couple things that entrepreneurship is just basically a process of self-discovery, and success manifests itself in different ways. But you pointed out some really interesting things. You describing it, kind of like the tools, and then you had to clean up, and this idea of somatic work, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But one thing that really stood out is basically you're constantly evolving and redefining who you are, which is, characteristic of entrepreneurs. And then basically you talk about the trauma, and then you describe a moment of serendipity. What was that moment?
Well, there were quite a few in my trajectory. I mean, looking back, I feel like I was protected. Even, Barbara Walters as an exercise client, I used to watch her on my basement, on my beanbag chair, on my belly growing up, and just admired her so much. And there I was knocking on her door, to be her personal trainer for an hour. It's just all kinds of serendipity coming together over and over again. How I was sought out to convince Andy Warhol, and how that would set off a whole trajectory of experience. How I would meet a woman on jury duty who would later bring me to Hearst to book talent for TV shows and VH1 and MTV, and then to be invited to Los Angeles to work with her and help launch a reality series. You never know where those opportunities are going to come from. And I'm grateful that I didn't get too in school. And, I never created a business plan. I've never been to business school. I've done it intuitively, and I've just taken the next step, and I've asked a lot of questions along the way, and the gateways sort of open when it's the direction that I'm to flow in. The gateways just continually open. I've had some doors shut quite solidly, but that's just the sign. Hey, maybe not that direction, maybe this direction instead.
And what it sounds like is really, because especially in entertainment, do you really need to go to school for that? Maybe if you want to executive or whatnot. But what you're talking about is basically living from the heart, and you've done it in so many different ways. You've transferred trauma, you've redefined yourself. You wrote a book. You work with celebrities, which is one deep question is, what helps you create transformation from trauma, or how do you go about that?
I'm really so happy you're enlightened to ask that question, because that has been such an unveiling in my life. I didn't understand the family dynamics truly. I thought most people grew up the way that I had and experienced. And it wasn't until issues were coming up that I could see I needed to take that look backwards. And I make it to Southern California hooey on you, but I truly believe I came here with a plan. There was no accident that I was in the family I was. I'm grateful to my parents. I'm grateful to my siblings. I'm grateful for the family lineage. I see how it's played out. I see how my experience of it and the willingness to take a look at it and really lift up the layers, to stare underneath, to see it's not just all mold and rot. There's some real flecks of gold under there that are transformation. That's the transformation. Can I see this from a new point of view? And can I shift this?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I find, just hold it. And then they die, or they have a near-death experience, and they're shown a different way. I'm like, I'm going to take a look at it while I'm here. Try to sift through it all while I'm here, and find a different light. So I truly feel like transforming the trauma is a soul evolution and heart opening.
Yeah, that's quite profound when you say transforming trauma, soul evolution, and heart opening. A lot of listeners out there, they're holding on to all this trauma. Either they're running away, workaholism, or running towards, trying to strive, so what does that kind of feel? I guess what does it feel like? What does it look like? Just kind of, bits and pieces. I know it's, this type of work is very deep. So.
Well, first I had to slow down. I was so traumatized. I just was running. I was achieving. I was going. I was performing the way that I thought you might want me to perform. So I really needed to slow down. And that either happened for me because I didn't have a choice. Life has a way of doing that.
Yeah.
And meditate did help that a bit. It was very difficult in the beginning. I was introduced to meditation on my way out of New York City and embraced it more deeply once I was in Los Angeles. And I've done long-term silent meditation retreats, and that's been incredibly helpful. I thought meditation was all about complete silence, like completely. I had no idea I was going to sit on a cushion and be tortured by all these thoughts streaming through this big, beautiful brain of mine. So that was a realization that was profound, I have to say, but just really getting still, and also like just counting my breaths or doing repetitive 4 in, hold 4, out 4 can take me from a breathing dragon right into my body grounded and open, back to a true, authentic human being ready to be open and listen.
Wow, very fascinating. We'll talk a little bit about because you described these concepts and really and you applied it towards entrepreneurs. One question before we talk about your works is this idea where you talk about somatic work. What I've heard of that, and I've heard people do like energy shadow work, but describe what that is.
So for me, somatic work means going into my body. I've always related through the body. I don't know if that comes because I started training as a dancer when I was 3 on, or it was just the athleticism of our family, but I've always related through my body, and I've always carried trauma in my body. I mean, as an adult, that manifested in a hip impingement on my left side, which I've actually worked through. I haven't gone the traditional Western route. I've worked with muscle versus the trauma and the pathology. Yeah, I think I lost my train of thought there, but
the somatic into the body.
Somatic work. Yeah. So that can be going inside and seeing where a particular feeling is, what color it is. Is it moving? Is it still? Is it explosive? Is it quiet? And just watching it shift. And I've had trapped emotions release through methodologies like that. There's the Bradley method. There's all types of methods. Yoga has also helped, particularly yin yoga, where you're just holding a position for 2 to 5 minutes. And the same kind of experience, I feel everything shifting in through the body and opening, and the tension or the trauma dissipating.
Wow, interesting. That's quite interesting because I've experimented a little bit, and it's like it's hard to tell, what is, where's the trauma, or if there is trauma, or where you store it, and it's kind of interesting. But definitely, what are some resources, books, or podcasts, YouTube channels to check that out?
So the Bradley method, people can Google the Bradley method, which is really helpful. You have to have a practitioner, but one of my favorites, when I was going through my divorce, I did something called the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program. And the somatic program was called Quanta Freedom Healing. It's an Australian woman. Her name is Melanie Tonya Evans. And you go in through the body, and it can be current, it can be past, it can be historical, but she takes you through a release of so many different emotions. And that's what got me through my divorce, that work, and really prompted a lot of somatic healing for myself.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. And I want to, as we come to the end, you've really beautifully described a lot of these as subjective concepts. Tell people about your book, Toxic Family: Transform Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, where people can find it, what it's about, and all about that journey.
Well, sure. I mean, the first thing when I hear the title out of your mouth, I kind of shake, because it wasn't my original title. My publisher came up with the Toxic Family Child. Mine was Magical Illumination, because I feel like I've gone through my life to uncover so much, and it has been a magical journey. But really, the book is about a toxic family system and the impact that had on me as a child, and the trauma, and then transforming that as an adult to live fully and thrive and to break those old systems. So the book is my first, even though I've been told for many years I have that book to write. And I've been told there are more coming. So we'll see what happens. But it releases March 22nd. And that's actually my mother's birthday, which is so serendipitous. And I'm already, getting a positive response. I think it's really told in an honest way. It's a memoir, and it's told very honestly. And I think people are resonating.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, book, when I wrote out my book is very cathartic, and basically it's kind of a way to process things. And for the audience out there, Susan's resources will be in the links and show notes, and especially the link to her book. And lastly, where can people find out more about you, follow you, check you out on social media, etc.?
Thank you so much for asking. So they can go to susangold.us, and you can sign up there for a free little snippet audio portion of the first couple of pages of the book, and also keep up to date with what's happening there. And then that's also my website, susangold.us, and you can get in touch with me through the site. And there's also resources and help there on the site. And I look forward to hearing from your listeners and helping.
Yeah. And for all the listeners out there, this is really fascinating individual. And thanks, Susan, for coming onto the show, sharing her wisdom and her experience. Be sure to check her out she's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, as well as her website, Susan Gold US. And she's got a free audio file of the first page of the new book. And then also check out the book itself. It's probably on Amazon, and I'll check it out as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the show.